All right, guys, up next, we're going to talk about Hasan Piker because this socialist streamer just epically failed at basic economics. If you don't know him, Hassan is like this star of the internet. He's a massive Twitch streamer. He has a huge amount of fans. He's arguably one of the most influential people on all of social media, especially in the political realm. He also has no idea what he's talking about, is a full-fledged Marxist, and has a view of economics that is incoherent and absurd to the extreme, as made extremely clear by this bizarre clip of him rambling about free trade and why it's bad. Take a listen to this.
Dude, someone is messaging this appropriately. Holy shit. It's not mad. He's right. He's right. Democrats should not be in favor of free trade. Democrats should be the first to acknowledge that free trade is what has gutted the American manufacturing capabilities, destroyed the American labor force, destroyed the countryside. He's a good messenger on this. Bad take? Why is that a bad take? Free trade is nice. Without free trade, or with free trade, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no labor force. Without a labor force, you have no labor power. Without labor power, you have no way to, without labor power, you have no labor unions. Without labor unions, you have no way to increase wages. Without increasing your wages, you arrive at what America is doing currently, which is 23% underemployment, gig economy jobs galore, no protections whatsoever, no mechanism of pushback against the one party that's supposed to be against the right-wing reactionary forces, and you arrive at a nation with no healthcare, with no future, no retirement funds, a nation in disarray. All of it ties back to labor at the end of the day. Free trade is nice if you are not in the US, though. No, it's not. That's also incorrect. What are you talking about? Free trade is not nice. Do you believe the WTO narrative that free trade has actually greatly improved the living standards of all these other countries? No, obviously it has not. That is not the case at all. The one country that has actually been able to dramatically improve itself in that process is China, and that is not because of the free trade. That is because of what they did with the foreign capital that came in. The only thing that free trade benefits is capital owners. That's why America did it for so many years.
So this is insane because basically everything he said is incorrect as a matter of like principle or theory or factually incorrect. For example, he talks about the decline of US manufacturing capabilities. There is no decline. There is a decline in employment in the manufacturing sector. We manufacture more today in the US than ever. I'll put the graph up on screen of total industrial production. You can see that it's much higher today than it was during the supposed glory days of manufacturing. We just employ fewer people in it, in part because of trade and those jobs going to where they can be done more cheaply, and other jobs happening here in the US instead, but honestly more so because of technology and automation. That's the real explanation behind this. But the US still does have a manufacturing factor that is robust, and trade restrictions often hurt manufacturing more than they actually help. A great example of this was Trump's first term steel tariffs. They helped the steel manufacturers, but they hurt all the other manufacturers who rely on the cost of steel as an input and had their costs go up. And the net effect was negative for manufacturing. There's ample research on this. So we're already wrong there. But then Hassan goes and says that without manufacturing, you don't have a labor force. What? Huh? You don't think people working in other fields instead still constitutes a labor force? You don't think people working in services? You don't think people working in construction? You think they're not a labor force just because they don't do manufacturing? It's bizarre. It doesn't make sense. Then he goes and says, and without a labor force, you don't have labor unions. Again, still have a labor force, even if they're not all manufacturing things. If they're doing other kinds of work, they're still laborers. And then he says, and if you don't have labor unions, strong labor unions, you don't have any way to raise wages. That's just not true. I mean, we have tons of entire industries where there are basically no unions, and people still increase their wages all the time in competitive free markets. And private sector unionization is near all-time lows in the United States. Yet wages for those workers, even adjusted for inflation, are much higher than they were decades ago in the pinnacle of the private union era. So I just don't know what he's rambling about. Basically, everything is factually incorrect at every turn, but this is one of the most influential people on the internet. Oh, and what he dismisses as the World Trade Organization narrative about free trade reducing global poverty isn't a narrative and isn't just the World Trade Organization. It is a fact that as free trade, directly because of this, has spread throughout the world, billions of people have been raised out of absolute poverty. It's just a fact. It's not like an opinion. It's not something you could argue that maybe there were other downsides that are worse, but you can't just say it didn't happen. The numbers are there. You can look at them. It's obviously true. And a huge part of the explanation for it is free trade. And that also applies to China. Hassan is also totally wrong about China. Yes, China had huge reductions in poverty, but they did that by making their economy less socialist, not more, by opening it up with market reforms and by doing more trade. I'll even show you this graph of China's trade and its poverty rate. You tell me. What's the correlation here? Oh, as trade goes up, their poverty rate goes down. So they did increase trade. He doesn't know what he's talking about again, or he does and he's just not being honest and doing propaganda. You tell me. But the really concerning thing about me for this kind of economic illiteracy is, to be honest with you, it's what I expect from socialists, from Marxists like Hassan. Although I am dismayed at how much influence they somehow have and how many followers they have that don't know their leaders are just wrong and incorrect about so many things. What actually bothers me more is that you hear MAGA people who, some on the protectionist right, basically sound like that. Basically sound like Hassan when it comes to trade, have the same kind of zero-sum, economically illiterate, innumerable, factually challenged view of trade and economics. And they're supposed to be the ones that get it. Republicans are supposed to be the ones that are better on economics and better for the economy. Some of them now basically agree with the socialists, with their dark and fact-free view of the global economy and how it works. That's even more concerning to me than Hasan Piker's content alone. But what do you guys think? Have you seen these kinds of takes elsewhere, not just from the socialists of the internet? Do let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button if you haven't yet.